In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a game object that follows the mouse cursor around in the 3D view, but positions itself based on where the mouse cursor is on top of the world or the 3D objects itself. So this is sort of useful logic if you want to ever have the user clicking on something in your scene, in your 3D game, or you want to be like placing an object down, like if you're building a building and you're going to place it somewhere, or if they're like drawing or something else along those lines. So I'm clicking in the 3D space and I want to know where it is that I'm clicking, right? The first thing, let's look at my scene setup. So I just have a floor object here, and the important part about this is it has a collider associated with it. Right. So I am going to be using the physics system to do this. So it is only going to detect objects that have colliders. So I need to make sure that my floor is a collider. If using terrain, it needs to have a terrain collider, so on and so forth. Right. The next thing is I have a game manager object. My game manager setup, it's an empty, invisible game object. It only has logic associated with it. My game manager is going to be what is doing all of the logic for moving the object around with my mouse cursor. Then I have an object called mouse cursor. It's just a visual. There's nothing on this except for a mesh renderer, and that's pretty much it. So this object I want to make move around the scene, right? Finally, I have my scene variables. This comes hand in hand once you start setting up scene variables inside of the script machine, inside of your visual scripting system. So let's go edit the graph in the game manager and hook all this up. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go to the scene tab of my script graph, and I'm going to add a new variable here, which will be a reference to the mouse cursor object. So I'm just going to call it the mouse cursor object. And this is going to be a game object. And before I forget to do this, I will hop back over here to my scene variables, and I have my mouse cursor object now. And I'm going to change this to be a game object. And I'm going to connect my mouse cursor object, which is this red ball, to it, right? So now I have a reference to that mouse cursor object that's in my scene. Okay, when do I want this logic to happen? Well, I want it to happen every single update. Every single time the game updates and renders, I want to update the position of this object to be the position that my mouse is over, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the position of the mouse. So I'm just going to search for mouse position and see what comes up. Okay, here we go. Input get mouse position. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to, based on the position of my mouse, wherever it is on the screen, I want to sort of fire a laser beam going straight out of the camera at that position to see what it hits. So it's essentially like I'm aiming at a position and I'm going to fire a laser beam like this, and I'm going to see what it hits, and it's going to hit this position on the floor, right? So that's essentially what I'm trying to do. So I need to take the position of my mouse, wherever it is in this 2D window, and then based on the current view of my camera, I'm going to essentially turn that into what's called a ray, which is kind of just like a laser beam, right? It gives me a position and orientation to tell me which direction do I want to fire something in. Then the next step is I'm going to use the physics system to tell me, hey, if I actually fired a laser right here, what would it hit if it followed this path? And then that will eventually give me a position. And then the last thing is I'm going to set the position of that game object to that final position. So what do I need to do this? Well, the first thing is it's based on the current view. So I need to get the main camera. So I'm just doing camera.getMain. Now, camera.getMain gets the main camera of the scene or whatever I'm looking at. And that's pretty much it. So there's my main camera. The next thing I'm going to use is a unit called screen point to ray, which converts a screen position, which is where my mouse is, into a ray, right? Which is sort of like that laser. So I'm going to use this block here, and it's going to ask me for, okay, which camera are you generating this laser from, right? And I want to hook it up to the main camera. Okay, which position on the screen do you want to use? Well, I want to use my mouse position to do that, so I'll hook that up, right? I'll hook my update up there. So the first thing it does is it creates this object that sort of represents the ray, right? That's firing an introduction. Okay, great. Now that I have this output of a ray, and I'm going to then use a raycast from the physics system. So the physics raycast, there's a whole bunch of different versions of this thing, right? And I want to use the ones that have a ray as a parameter. And I'm going to use this one, ray, and then hit info. If you use the one that's just ray, it's just going to tell you true or false whether or not you hit something. And what I want is, I want true or false, but I also want to know more information. What is it that I hit? And where is it that I hit? So I'm going to use this one, ray, hit info. So a raycast takes a ray, which is a position and a direction, fires that laser beam, and it will tell me what colliders it hit. So remember I said that the floor had to have a collider on it. It's because I'm using the physics system to do this. And the physics system doesn't care or doesn't even know about objects that don't have colliders on them. So they need to have colliders. All right, so I'm going to convert my mouse position using my camera into a ray. Then I'm going to hook that up to a raycast. I'm going to give it the information from the ray that I created. And now, based on this, I have a Boolean output on whether or not I hit something. So I could do an if statement based on this. And then I also have this hit info. If I drag out from here, I can see there's this raycast hit. And I can get a bunch of data from this. I can get the distance, how far it went until it hit something. I can get the collider that it hit, in which case I could get, hey, this hit the floor, right? And then based on that collider, I could get the game object that it hit as well. I could get the rigid body that it hit. I could get the, a whole bunch of other stuff in here. So I'm going to use get point. Get point will give me the actual position of the object that it hit. And then finally, that's what I want to set the position of my mouse cursor object to. So I'm going to find that unit that's called transform, because remember the position's part of the transform of every game object. And I'm going to search for set position. So here's my transform set position. So I want to set the position of my cursor game object, and I want to set it equal to the point that the raycast hit. And that's the last thing I want to do. So that's it. So let's take a look at this one more time. Every update, generate a new ray based on the main camera and based on my mouse position. Use that ray in the physics system to fire out the laser, do a raycast, determine what I hit, and then based on what I hit, give me the point at which I hit it, and then set the position of the game object to that point. Let's take a look at this thing in action. Cool. It doesn't work. Oh, there we go. It does work. All right, here we go. So every single update, as I move my mouse cursor around, it's moving that object with me, right? And so it's following on this plane. This is exactly how you would set up, I want to build a tower here, or I want to click on an enemy or click on an object. This is exactly how you could do it.